My girlfriend said, "We are in different places financially." I replied, "You're right." Then I sent one text, ordered a whiskey, and sat at the bar while phones came out. People searched my company name, and a club video later started spreading after the sound outside made everyone turn. This is AF Tales. Today's story follows a man who was publicly dumped for not seeming wealthy enough, only for the truth to land louder than any argument ever could. While you listen, imagine how you would handle the same kind of disrespect. My name is Atlas. I am 28, and for the past 4 years I have been running a tech company in Austin. We build enterprise software that helps companies manage their data systems. It is not the kind of business people brag about at parties because it sounds boring unless you work in tech, but it has done very well. Better than well, really. By the time this story happened, the company was worth around $50 million. I do not say that to sound impressive. In fact, the whole reason this story happened is because I usually try not to sound impressive at all. I learned early that money changes the way people treat you. Some people become warmer. Some become more careful. Some become interested for reasons that have nothing to do with you. After a few bad experiences in my early 20s, I started keeping my finances private when I dated. Not because I wanted to play games, but because I wanted to know how someone saw me before money entered the picture. That is how I met Juniper. We met at Radio Coffee on South Lamar. I used to work there a couple afternoons a week. She was often at the same corner table, surrounded by books and notes, studying for business school finals at UT. We had noticed each other a few times, and one day I asked if she wanted another coffee while I was ordering mine. That simple question turned into a 3-hour conversation. She was beautiful, obviously. But more than that, she was quick, funny, sharp. She had opinions about Austin growth, city planning, old neighborhoods, and family businesses. She told me her family had been in Austin for generations, with old money tied to land and cattle. The kind of wealth that comes with social rules you never have to explain because everyone in your circle already knows them. From the start, I could tell she was trying to place me, not in a harsh way. More in the way someone raised around money quietly sorts people into categories without even realizing they are doing it. On our first real date, I picked her up in my Toyota Camry. I owned a BMW too, but I left it at home on purpose. When she got in, she looked around the car and smiled politely. "Nice car," she said. The words were fine. The tone told the real story. That was one of the first red flags. Not a huge one on its own, but the kind that matters more later. For the next several months, I got a close look at how Juniper and her family thought about status. She never said anything openly cruel. That was part of what made it slippery. It came out in little comments, little assumptions, little ways of talking that always placed her higher and me lower. She would suggest some expensive restaurant, then quickly say it was probably too much. She would mention a trip she wanted to take, then pivot to something more realistic. She once told me her dad might be able to introduce me to useful people in tech, as if I were still trying to get into the room instead of quietly building my own table somewhere else. When I suggested, we split a dinner bill one night. She smiled and said she loved how practical I was about money. She said most guys tried too hard to impress her by spending more than they could afford. There it was again, that quiet assumption that I was a decent guy with limited options. Her parents were polite when I met them, but distant. Her mother, Victoria, was polished and careful. Her father, Hamilton, had the calm confidence of someone who had never once worried about the cost of anything necessary. They asked about my work, nodded when I answered, then moved on. It felt less like getting to know me and more like checking a box. Her uncle Sterling was worse. Sterling worked in investment banking and carried himself like a man who thought he could smell net worth from across the room. He was not openly rude, which almost made it harder. He specialized in the kind of polished condescension that sounds harmless until you hear it enough times. He would ask how the software world was treating me, then remind me how unstable tech could be. He would tell me to keep my expectations realistic. Once he said that if I stayed focused, maybe I would work my way into management one day. Management. I owned the company. I never corrected him. At first I told myself I was observing, learning, being patient. But over time, I started feeling the effect of it. Not because I doubted myself, but because when people keep treating you as lesser, it changes the air around you. You start noticing how often you are expected to explain yourself. You start feeling grateful for respect that should have been basic from the start. That is what bothered me most. Juniper did not seem to see the problem. She thought she was being considerate. She thought she was being flexible by dating someone she believed was financially beneath her. It created this quiet, unhealthy dynamic where she was the secure one, the elevated one, the one making room for me in her life. And I was supposed to appreciate that. A lot of people stay in situations like that because nothing looks dramatic yet. There is no explosion, just a slow drip of disrespect. Then came her graduation party. She had finished her business degree, and her family threw a big celebration at Westwood Country Club. She warned me in advance that it would be fancy. I told her that was fine. What I did not tell her was that I had been to Westwood before for business events. My company had sponsored one of their charity tournaments. I knew the place. I knew the crowd. I also knew exactly what kind of room I was walking into. That night, I wore my usual khakis and a button-down shirt. Clean, appropriate, understated. Not flashy. Certainly less formal than many of the men there in tailored suits and polished shoes. Juniper looked stunning. Black dress, perfect hair, expensive makeup, the whole thing. She introduced me around the room, but her wording caught my attention. She kept saying, "This is Atlas. He works in software." He works in software. Not he built a company, not he runs a business, not even he is in tech. Just a vague line that made me sound like a junior employee somewhere. The party was exactly what you would expect from old Austin money. Open bar, catered dinner, live jazz, a room full of people who had known one another for years and did not hide the fact that they were evaluating everyone else in it. For the first hour, I kept things simple. I made polite conversation. I smiled. I answered questions. I let the assumptions sit where they were. Then Sterling waved me over near the bar. He asked how the software business was going. I said I could not complain. He told me to keep grinding and joked that maybe one day I would work my way up. A few people around him laughed. Then he launched into a speech about how tough the economy was for young people and how important it was to have realistic expectations about the kind of life you could afford. He was not just talking to me. He was performing for the room. Around 10 o'clock, Juniper walked over, and I knew from her face that something was off. She had been drinking most of the evening, and her voice was louder than usual. She said we needed to talk. Then, without lowering her voice, she started breaking up with me right there at her own graduation party. She said we were in different places financially. She said we had different expectations. She said she needed someone who could match her ambition and provide the kind of life she wanted. People nearby stopped talking and turned toward us. That moment tells you everything you need to know. A private problem gets handled in private. Public humiliation is not honesty. It is theater. Then she said the part I still remember word for word. She said I was not in her league financially and not husband material. A few uncomfortable laughs broke out around us. And then she added something about me being lucky I had ever kept up at all. Something about affording dinner without her father's help. That part hit hardest, not because it was true, but because of how casually cruel it was. She had turned my supposed limitations into entertainment for a room full of people. Sterling stepped in right after that, smiling like he had been waiting for his cue. He told me not to take it too hard. He said Juniper had standards to maintain. He said maybe in a few years, once my career was more established, I could try dating in that league again. That was the moment everything became clear. Not just Juniper. The whole family. The whole environment. 14 months of being measured against a standard they thought I could never reach, and now they were enjoying the moment they imagined I finally got put in my place. I did not feel rage. I felt something colder, clarity. I looked at Juniper and said, "You're right." Then I took out my phone and sent one message. After that, I walked to the bar, ordered a whiskey, and sat with it. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I did not reveal anything. I just drank slowly while the room kept glancing over, probably wondering why I was not hurrying out in shame. Juniper approached me once. I did not engage. Sterling kept looking over like he expected me to crack. I finished my drink. Then people heard it. At first it was distant, then louder. Rotor blades. The sound got close enough that conversations started falling apart mid-sentence. Heads turned toward the windows. People drifted outside or toward the glass. A helicopter was coming in low over the field beside the club. It landed with Reeves Dynamics printed clearly on the side. My company name. My company logo. The entire room went quiet. I stood up, left cash on the bar, and started walking toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Juniper call my name. Then again, louder. I did not turn around. By the time I reached the helicopter, everyone inside had either gathered at the windows or pulled out their phones. As I climbed in, I saw them standing there in stunned silence, realizing the man they had just humiliated was not some struggling software employee. I was the founder they had spent a year talking down to. Sometimes the cleanest response is not an argument. It is letting the truth arrive on its own. The next morning, my friend Kai texted me updates. His girlfriend worked events at the club and had stayed late. Apparently, the room had gone into chaos the second I left. People started searching my company name. They found our funding announcements, interviews, business profiles, and my photo in a local 40 under 40 list. Juniper reportedly tried to chase after the helicopter in heels, then ended up crying in the bathroom for nearly an hour. Her mother was horrified. Her father immediately started researching my company, probably trying to figure out just how badly they had misread the situation. Sterling, according to Kai, had an even worse night. Several people at the party actually knew who I was. Once they realized what had happened, the smug uncle who had spent the evening mocking me suddenly looked like an idiot in front of a room full of local business contacts. Then social media got hold of it. Someone had filmed the moment I walked toward the helicopter while Juniper shouted after me. The clip spread fast around Austin. Local pages picked it up. Business circles passed it around. It turned into one of those stories people shared because it fit so neatly into a lesson they already wanted to believe. My phone exploded all weekend. Juniper called, texted, left voicemail after voicemail. At first she sounded confused, then apologetic, then desperate. She kept saying I should have told her. She kept saying everything changed now. But that was exactly the problem. Everything had changed for her. Nothing had changed for me. Sterling called too, suddenly interested in clearing the air and discussing opportunities. Juniper's mother sent a message saying they would love to welcome me properly into their circle. That line almost made me laugh. For 14 months, they treated me like I was lucky to be tolerated. Now they wanted to welcome me. I spent that weekend at my actual home, a downtown penthouse Juniper had never seen, thinking about how quickly people reveal themselves when status enters the room. It was not even the public breakup that hurt most. It was realizing that if the helicopter had never landed, they all would have walked away feeling justified. That is what mattered. Over the next 6 weeks, Juniper launched a full campaign to get me back. She showed up at my office lobby with coffee and apologies. She cried. She got angry. She accused me of lying by omission. She said I had made her look like a fool by letting her believe I was less successful than I was. One day in the lobby, in front of several employees, she said, "How was I supposed to know you were actually successful? You drove a Toyota." That sentence told me she still did not understand anything. I was not pretending to be a failure. I was just living without showing off. And in her world, that made no sense because money, to her, was supposed to signal itself at all times. Her family joined the effort. Her father called wanting to talk investments. Her mother sent flowers. Sterling suggested lunch to discuss mutual interests, as if we had always been equals. Mutual friends started reaching out to say she had made a mistake and people do stupid things when they drink. That was true. People do make mistakes when they drink. But drinking does not invent values out of nowhere. It lowers the filter on values already there. The strangest moment came about 3 weeks later. I was having dinner downtown when I spotted Juniper at another table with a man who looked like wealth in human form. Loud watch, loud opinions, loud stories about his portfolio. She saw me, excused herself, and came over to my table. She told me the guy was a loser who only cared about money and status. Then she said she missed being with someone real, someone with substance. She said I had taught her what actually mattered. I listened, but inside, all I could think was that she was still talking to a version of me she had invented. First, I was the modest underdog she could date without risking her place above me. Then I was the hidden millionaire she wanted back. In neither case was she really seeing me. By the time months had passed, the fallout had spread beyond our relationship. Austin is not that big when it comes to business and reputation. The story stayed with her. Dates knew about it. Employers knew about it. Her family's name took a hit too, especially Sterling's. Publicly mocking someone successful might sound funny for 30 seconds, but it does not build long-term trust. As for me, life kept moving. My company eventually went public and our valuation climbed far past where it had been that night. I made a Forbes list. I started speaking more at startup events. Professionally, everything was growing. Personally, I started seeing someone new. Rebecca is an attorney who built her own practice. She knew about my company before she knew much about me, which strangely made things easier. She did not care what car I drove. She did not need my money. She had her own success, her own standards, and none of them required putting me beneath her to feel secure. When I told her the whole Juniper story, she just looked at me and said she was glad I found out before marriage. She was right. A real partner is not impressed only when the number gets big enough. A real partner respects you before the reveal, before the win, before the public proof. Not long ago, I spoke at Austin's Startup Week about company culture. Juniper happened to be in the audience because of a networking requirement for her job. Afterward, she tried to come over. Security redirected her, not because I wanted revenge, just because there was nothing left to say. That whole experience taught me something I will probably carry for the rest of my life. Money does not create character. It reveals how other people respond to what they think your value is. Juniper thought she was dating down. She thought she was making room for someone outside her financial league. She thought she could publicly cut me loose and still come out looking superior. The helicopter did not prove I was worthy of her. It proved she was never worthy of me. Lesson 1. Pay close attention to small signs of disrespect. They often tell the truth before the big moment does. Lesson 2. If someone values status more than character, that problem will show up eventually, whether money is involved or not. Lesson 3. Public humiliation is never an accident. It is a choice, and it tells you exactly how little respect someone has for you. Lesson 4. You do not need to argue with people who have already decided your worth. Sometimes the strongest response is calm distance. Lesson 5. A real relationship feels equal, even when two people come from very different backgrounds. Lesson 6. It is better to learn a painful truth before marriage than to spend years building a life with someone who only loved your image. What would you have done at that party if you were in Atlas's place? And have you ever met someone who treated people differently based on what they thought those people were worth?